I hope that was a good introduction. I have literally no idea what you just said. So sorry, guys. So yes, you might want to don your headsets if you can't understand me, but welcome. I have my own now. Wonderful. Yeah, thank you all for joining us tonight, and thank you, Sergio, for putting this together and for flying us down from Silicon Valley. And yeah, tonight I want to talk about producing the next innovation ecosystem. How do you do what we did in Silicon Valley? And actually, that's my house. Well, not that one. That's the new Apple campus. I live right over like here, right off the screen. So my house is pretty much construction right now. But anyway, so tonight I want to answer one question. That's how can technology produce and drive an innovation ecosystem here in Montevideo? To answer that, we're going to go through 3 questions. Maybe I should stall a little bit so everyone can come back in. The first, how does an innovation ecosystem develop? Does technology drive the ecosystem, or does the ecosystem drive technology? And yes, that is Einstein 3D printed with biology cells on an agar plate, which I found to be kind of awesome, so here it is. Second question, where are the opportunities? What is the current state of the art? What are some of the opportunities that we're seeing in Silicon Valley? Maybe things that can spark some ideas for you. And the third is how can you create the next innovation ecosystem? What are some steps that should be taken to actually produce, drive, and encourage the ecosystem, leveraging what we know from Silicon Valley and everything else in this talk today? So I guess with that, we need to start with an innovation ecosystem. So we'll start with the spinning jenny. The spinning jenny was invented in 1764 by James Hargreaves in Lancashire, England. This is the invention here that ushered in the Industrial Revolution, little thing in history. And the reasoning that it came out was, at the time, to create cotton thread, you had to spin it by hand. It was very time consuming. It was literally the definition of a cottage industry because everyone was in their cottages spinning this cotton. Well, the spinning jenny comes around and increases the ability to create cotton thread by a factor of 8. This is also due to the fact that the flying shuttle was built about 30 years earlier, and this allowed people to weave twice as fast. And at the time, they were being able to weave clothes about 5 to 8 times faster than people could produce the thread. This was a big problem. James Hargreaves saw it as a problem, built this machine. So why is this interesting? Well, this was originally done by hand, or foot pedal. And they said, well, we need more. They created the spinning mule. It's a mechanical version of the spinning jenny, hundreds of meters in length. These things were huge, and they could spin an enormous amount of cotton thread. Well, they're mechanical. At the time, they only had mechanical power. They didn't have power plants. They didn't even have coal. So what did they do? They built these on rivers. And in Lancashire, they had very fast rivers. Why is that important? Well, it means that you had a concentration of the technology. That technology and the owners of these textile mills then built housing around their mills. That created a concentration of people and ideas, which helped to start sparking this innovative ecosystem. So what does that mean? This is the impact that the spinning jenny had on our society. That's the gross domestic product per capita of the top 7 countries from the 1500s until 1913. In the span of one lifetime, the purchasing power, the gross domestic product per capita, for England doubled. For the US, it went up by 5x in one lifetime. Think about that. Your purchasing power increases by 5x. One car, 5 cars. One house, 5 houses. All the houses, why not? It literally was an inflection point that we've never seen before in society to this point. So let's look at some of the things that they did right in England. How did they become an innovation hub? Well, the first thing was that they had a concentration of skilled labor, a skilled workforce. Why? Well, this is because at the time, most of the cottage industry was already concentrated here in Lancashire. That meant that when they went to textile mills, when they started expanding rapidly, they already had the intelligence and the people, I should probably stop speaking right into this mic, to start driving this ecosystem. The second, they had a geographic advantage. Lancashire is, trust me, I didn't know where it is either, it's on the western bank of the UK. This meant that they had a direct link to the southern states where the cotton plantations were. Transportation was easy. They also had a damp weather. Complicated word, I know. And that made it so that the cotton didn't actually dry out. They also had steady, fast, constant streams. Again, mechanical power, steady streams. And so the last thing, or the third thing, they were accepting of innovation. Now at the time, cotton was new, it was sexy. Yes, you can tweet that cotton was sexy, at Garrett Dunham, and put the hashtag. But it was something new, it was something innovative. It drew entrepreneurs in, it got them excited about something that was growing, that they could build with. And dovetailing into our last point is that there was an open field. What do I mean by that? I mean the competition of cotton was wool at the time. Wool was stifled by hundreds of years of rules, laws, guilds. You have to do it this way because that's how you do it. Now, here's a quick poll. How many of you own almost entirely wool clothing? No one? No one owns? No, a couple people own. I don't believe you, actually, because you're wearing a cotton shirt. I'm teasing you, but it's something to think about, is that they were open to trying new things, whereas the wool industry was not. I'm wearing entirely cotton right now, so let that be an interesting lesson. All right, so let's look at another innovation ecosystem that you guys probably haven't heard of, Silicon Valley. This is my home. I actually was born and raised here, so I apologize. I do come from that show, Silicon Valley, and I'm kind of embarrassed about it. I want to talk today about one specific company that I almost assuredly know you haven't heard of, Fairchild Semiconductor. This is the company that literally created Silicon Valley. In 1950, Silicon Valley was just a valley. We had actually a lot of farming. There was not a lot of industry. We weren't even on the top 10 for silicon innovation. Nobody knew of us. And yet, 8 men came, created Fairchild Semiconductor, and they invented a way to mass produce transistors. Why is this interesting? Well, transistors are quite literally the foundation of almost all computer chips. They created the computer industry in Silicon Valley and created it to what it is today. So let's actually look at some of the impact that their one little company had. Not a whole lot. Spinouts from Fairchild include AMD and Intel. You can also trace Apple, the entire venture capital community, and I mean 92 different companies to Fairchild. $2.1 trillion is the market cap of all the companies that you could chase back to this one single company. Now, it's not exactly a fair comparison, but that's greater than the gross domestic product of Russia for a year. That's pretty damn impressive for 8 guys who had an interesting idea and moved to the middle of this valley. So let's trace one of these threads for a moment and see, how did this actually happen? So one of the things that I think that Silicon Valley has done really well, and I actually believe that Startup Chile has done well as well, is this reinvestment ecosystem. So let's trace a thread. Fairchild Semiconductor started, one of the founders started Kleiner Perkins, Cofield and Bayers, which is one of the premier Silicon Valley venture capital funds that we have, at least was. They funded Netscape. Netscape was built by Mark Andreessen and a number of other people. Actually, one of our advisors was one of their early employees, so some of his stories have been fairly interesting. Their founders they then created Opsware, which they sold for $1.6 billion. And they said, well, creating Netscape and Opsware, we worked with Kleiner, and frankly, we can do this better. We should invest all of these earnings that we got back into the ecosystem. So what do? They started Andreessen Horowitz. Andreessen Horowitz, in 5 years, has gone from nothing to one of the top venture capital companies, one of the top firms in Silicon Valley. It's absolutely impressive what they've done. Now they've invested in Box, Pinterest, Airbnb, Lyft, which is a competitor to Uber, which we saw earlier today. Those are all billion-dollar-plus companies. I have a guess that one of those will go and make it big, and sell. What are they going to do? Well, let's look at the pattern here. Fairchild, build a company, invest it back. Build a company, invest it back, build a company. You get the point. We've got 60 years of this reinvestment culture, and it's absolutely been what has made us really where we are today. Now, we did have some help. I highly recommend visiting Stanford if you ever get the chance. It's beautiful. This is one of my favorite shots. This street is actually lined with palm trees all the way down about 2-3 kilometers. We also have Berkeley. Why does this matter? Well, again, concentration of really smart people in our vicinity. So what were some of the successes? How did Silicon Valley come about? There's 4 things that we found that seem to be what helped to spark and grow Silicon Valley into what it is right now. But first, we just discussed highly educated workforce. Not only from Stanford, but we've also been drawing in people because smart people like to work with smart people. Google has been doing this actually extremely well. They were able to hire my roommate, who is sitting here saying, I'm so excited to work with other smart, passionate engineers. Which kills me. He should be in a startup, not in Google. That's a fight for another day. The second, I actually haven't discussed this very much, but Silicon Valley is about, I'm trying to do the conversion, 3,000 to 4,000 kilometers from Washington, D.C., clearly on the opposite ends of the continent. It means we get away with some stuff that we're not supposed to do. Uber is actually a really good example, Airbnb as well. They're not actually legal by the way that we have our regulations, but they were able to gain enough traction because they're sheltered from the government. We just kind of did it and hoped that no one would notice for long enough that there would be enough people who would say, no, I like that. And guess what? The government found out about it. They tried to shut it down, and they had a huge amount of people, including myself, saying, but I use Airbnb. I've had hundreds of residents. I've met a woman who said, I would be in an apartment and not in this beautiful Victorian house because I can't get a job. And instead, Airbnb is the only reason. For a sidebar, Airbnb allows you to rent extra rooms or beds in your house for money. It's phenomenal. I have a hacker house that runs off of it, and it's great. But she told me, I would be living on the street. I would be literally in an apartment and not in this house that has had several TV shows filmed in it because no one would hire me. So anyway, number 3, we had a big win. I mean, we've gone into it already. Fairchild Semiconductor was huge. But that was the spark. The spark then had to be grown. You had to reinvest. We saw that. You build a product, you reinvest. You build a product, you reinvest. This cycle keeps going and going and growing. It takes time, but it works out okay. So anyway, let's look now where some of the opportunities are. So actually, when I was first asked to do the speech, they said, well, tell us about where the opportunities are. And I thought, Everything's an opportunity. There's so much that's changing right now. How am I supposed to nail down just a couple of things? For God's sakes, there's a guy who made cheese here, earlier, successfully. It's phenomenal. I love it. There's opportunities everywhere. I said, I got to pin down some. So, I chose a few, and you're going to just have to hopefully you like these two. The first is mobile. We've gone into this a little bit, but I love this quote from Ben Horowitz. That name has come up a couple times. This is the Horowitz and Andreessen Horowitz. The importance of this thing is absolutely astounding. You have a fleet of sensors in your pocket. They can tell you if you're running, if you're biking, if you're in a car. You have a touch screen. It can be a remote, Wi-Fi. The computer in this is more powerful than what we had, 5, 7 years ago? Think about that. The implications are absolutely unbelievable. So what does that mean? Well, we've been betting big on it. So I want to go into a couple of things that mobile has disrupted. What is changing, what is new. Hopefully it sparks some ideas. Taxis, we have Lyft and Uber. The taxis hate this thing. And yet, with a push of a button, I can have a car that will drive me to where I want to be, and it'll arrive in 5 to 8 minutes. It's absolutely the most phenomenal user experience that you can have. And cabs are saying, well, why don't you want to sit here waiting for 30 minutes while we maybe show up and charge you some amount that you can't see up ahead, and we show up or we don't, and oh wait, we don't want taxis because, or we don't want Lyft because our user experience is so bad that nobody wants to be on it. This thing is great. Health, we're seeing tons of push into the health sector. We've got Runkeeper, Strava tells you how your hikes are in elevation, how long you've gone. Health Kit, Google's betting big on health now. And again, you can find out so much just on the accelerometers in this thing. Dating. How many of you know what Tinder is? I've heard of Tinder. I see some hesitant hands. I'm like, Well, yes, Tinder had a little bit of a seedy reputation when it started, right? It was kind of known as the hookup app. Well, guess what? It's also the #1 app for marriages now. It's created more marriages than anything else online. Is that crazy or what? I find that somebody I like, say hi to them. Lastly, banking. I haven't been to my bank and I can't remember how long. I get a check, I take a picture of it, I get a little notification. Oh, it's been deposited. Great, tear it up, on with my day. I love it. It's better than ATM, it's better than everything. Anyway, what's being disrupted? Lots of things. So, there are some things though that aren't being disrupted. Actually, I don't know if there are. I'll be honest, I have seen point of sale systems in restaurants using an iPad, so you can hit a button, boom, it's already in the back, they're starting to cook it. I've seen you can take a picture of your credit card, have it upload, start being able to purchase immediately. I've seen please don't create this, by the way. This is as bad of a Silicon Valley kind of thing as you could create. But it's on-demand laundry. You want somebody to do your laundry, you're in an apartment, beep. They show up 15 minutes later, they pick up your laundry, hand you a cookie, and they're on their way. Again, please don't create it. It's not, I'm not a fan of it, but it just goes to show even laundry is being disrupted by mobile. So let's transition a little bit to the second opportunities that we're seeing, and that's cloud. And this has been a big topic for 20 years. I say, let's go from the iron to the sky. So, actually I don't want to show you that yet. I started my career working for a small company. And when I say small, I mean it was like 4 people in a town that I guarantee you've never heard of because no one in a town 30 minutes away has heard of it. Selling servers to small businesses in 2009. So what I would try to do was convince companies of 2 to 100 people that they should really spend several $1,000s on an Exchange server. They should really then spend hundreds, if not thousands of dollars a year to maintain it. It's brilliant, right? 2009, you could spend tens of thousands of dollars on email. Or you just go to Gmail for $50 a person and you don't have to back it up. You don't have to do any work. It's all in the cloud. The ubiquity of Gmail now is actually just staggering. They don't release their numbers very often, but the last I could check, they have 500 million people use Gmail. For reference, that's larger than the population of the United States, the United Kingdom, Italy, Argentina, and Uruguay combined. Extra couple million. It's huge though. I mean, they're owning email, and it's such a better process. It's so much better than Exchange. I don't know how many people still have to use Exchange at work, but I gotta tell you, I hate it. Well, I don't anymore because my boss told me not to. Anyway, so email though, I mean, we've been seeing the transition to email to the cloud for 15 years. So let's go something more complicated. Let's look at, I don't know, what would be more processor intensive? Maybe Photoshop. Surely Photoshop couldn't be disrupted, right? It can't move to the cloud. Or maybe it can. Actually, Aviary has been doing some really interesting work. And instead of being the Photoshop for the cloud, they said, well, all these apps, they need a way to edit photos easily. How do we plug in and edit? They're now powering Flickr, doing billions of photos a day. I think that it's actually, Photoshop and Adobe should really be taking note of not only them. One of the startups that I've worked with, or one of the engineers, the startup that I've worked with, has since moved on to a literal Photoshop in the cloud. It's coming. So even Photoshop and something highly processor intensive is not safe. All right, so let's go deeper. Maybe the operating system has to be kernel level. It's tied to the processor. You can't really disrupt that, right? Yeah, I was intentionally baiting you on that. Here's a big shocker. Chrome OS, you've even got actually Microsoft Cloud and Jolly Cloud are all building the operating system in the cloud. And if you think about it, it actually makes a lot of sense. So for an analogy, if every single one of us had a power generator at our home, it'd be a lot of waste, right? Why would you do that? Instead, you use economies of scale. You build one large power center, and then, or power plant, and then you distribute it. Well, that power plant now is starting to exist in Amazon and several others, and we're starting to see the power lines, or fiber optic, being created. In fact, I saw a startup. What they did was they put satellites, or what they're doing, they're putting satellites in the sky. They said, well, satellites are interesting because you usually use radio and they're slow, but we can use a laser. If we use a laser, we could effectively deploy fiber optic internet to the continent of Africa in a matter of weeks. So now all of a sudden, you've got quite literally the ability to have things like this. Your operating system from anywhere, and this thing just becomes a way to access your operating system. You don't need a computer. You'd rather me use that? All right. Test. Is this better? Can you still hear me? Bueno? All right. Yes, I know Spanish. Piquito. All right. So anyway, so let's look at a topic that's actually very near and dear to my heart, and this is healthcare. So healthcare, and the reason this is near to me is that I've created a startup accelerator that takes enterprise needs, a large company, multi-billion-dollar corporations in healthcare, and says, startups, how could you solve this? Then we run a program where we accelerate a paying contract with our enterprise partner in the startup from 24 months down to 4 months flat. So I started in healthcare for a number of reasons. Let's walk through them. Okay, Rock Health is a little bit of a competitor of mine, but they make some pretty nice graphs, so I'm going to use it anyway. 168% year-over-year growth in funding in Silicon Valley is enormous. You've got Google, Google, Apple, Microsoft, all building HealthKit and all their different health apps. Why? Because the opportunity is absolutely astounding. The United States spends $1.8 trillion per year and trending towards 20% of our GDP on healthcare. The GDP of India is $1.8 trillion. Think about that. We spend more on healthcare in the United States than I believe it's country number 7 or 8 on the top list of GDPs, and most of them combine after that. It's absolutely absurd. And because of that, I mean, there's unlimited needs. These are actually challenges that have been posed to us for our companies. There's a number of different ones. You've got the big boil of the ocean, medical adherence. $300 billion a year to get people to take their pills on time and refill them. $300 billion. Falling in a hospital. $1.9 billion market for hospital falls. Bed sores. We're talking literally, okay, I've just avoided having someone have a bed sore. $4.5 billion. If you're working on this, not only is there $4.5 billion of value, you're also keeping people from having infections, amputations. It's actually a huge problem. Blood pressure data. We had obviously an insurance company who came and asked us for this, but they said, we need blood pressure data. I said, why? Seriously, who cares? I said, well, 1,000 people a day die from hypertension. If we can get them to take their blood pressure, and if we can get them to run through small programs that we can do, we've already clinically shown that we can reduce deaths enormously, and we're willing to pay $1.50 per member per month for blood pressure data. Let's put this in perspective. A number of years ago, Facebook, so I believe this was in 2010 they released this data, Facebook was making $1 per user per year on advertising. $1.5 per user per month. It's a $6.5 billion business, just getting people to take their blood pressure and send it to you. So, feel free to tweet this, by the way. Really, I've found that in healthcare, especially in the US, everything's $1 billion business. It's insane how much opportunity is there. The nice thing is not only are you going to make a ton of money, you can help people, which I find to be really cool, right? Because it's the only industry I know of where you can be sitting on your yacht and say, damn, we really helped a lot of people. And this yacht is very nice. All right, so what's next? What are some of the opportunities some more opportunities that we've seen that I find interesting? We talked a bit about wearables today, mobile and wearables. The Institute for the Future believes that wearables will be ubiquitous by 2025. I personally know a lot of people who have wearables and have them hidden and stashed away in a drawer somewhere. I lost mine months ago. But the thing that really is interesting is implantables. And we're starting to see this. There's already someone who has a prosthetic arm wired into the synapses in his chest, and he can move a fake arm using your brain actually rewires and says, oh, if I flex my chest, I can move my arm. It's absolutely fascinating. Or this guy here. He had vision. He lost his vision. He said, well, that's not good enough. So he built a camera that's implanted into his, it's wired into his brain. And it's actually giving him vision again. This man can see after being blind because of implantables. We're seeing that implantables and ingestibles, so a pill that maybe tells you that you've taken it, or tells your doctor that you've been taking it, because let's be real, I don't care, I know. 2017, so just a couple of years, we're going to really start seeing these implantables. We've already discussed this a little bit today, but the Internet of Things I find fascinating. Your car, your toaster, maybe even your toilet connected to the internet. Well, why would you want that? Well, here's an idea, and feel free to steal this. You could have a sensor in your toilet that says that it's overflowing, sends you a message. Maybe your kid doesn't know how to turn off the valve. Hey, here's even better. You have a valve that knows that it's overflowing and turns it off for you and sends you a message saying, hey, you may want to call the plumber. These are things that are coming down the pipeline. And the Internet of Things is really fascinating. But what's after that? Now you've got everything connected to the internet. These are the things that get me really excited. The brain-computer interface. Think about this. Everything in your house is connected to the internet now. It's 10 years, 15, 20 years from now. Well, we're already starting to see the intersection of humans and technology. What if you could control your environment with your thoughts? If you could get into your car already knows that, one, you're in a bad mood, plays better music, maybe kind of livens it up. It's a self-driving car, it knows where you want to go. Or maybe even better, it takes you to get, a manicure, pedicure, or scotch, depending on, who you are. It does this all based on this brain-computer interface. It's some really fascinating stuff. So, we've also been seeing, this is IBM Watson, this is the computer that beat everybody at Jeopardy. This is big data meets machine learning. And it's now been learning for the last few years, and is at least a second-year MD student. Now think about this. This computer could effectively replace 40% of physicians, some of those base routine procedures, and not miss anything. And maybe it knows, hey, this small symptom, this is actually life-threatening when combined with all these other symptoms. It's absolutely fascinating. So there is the big overall trend that I think you've already been seeing, and that's that humans and technology are starting to rapidly collide. We're not really going to be able to stop it. So let's just hope that it looks more like Luke's arm here, and the fake arm, than Mr. Picard and the Borg. And really, it depends on people building the technology. All right, so we've looked at what are the other ecosystems and some of the opportunities. So I want to leave you with a few thoughts about building, creating, expanding the next ecosystem. The first is you really have to create a foundation. Like Da Vinci here, like these events. Also the mentality that failure is not really failing if you learn something from it, as we learned earlier today. You could start or go to the co-working space that you have here. I gotta say, these are absolutely critical. Why? Well, let's see. Homebrew Computer Club, ring any bells? Yes? No? One? All right, wonderful. Gracias. Apple came from the Homebrew Computer Club. This was a club where people met to talk about technology, created the largest market cap company, depending on the month, that exists right now. Right? Phenomenal. Or the Hacker Dojo. This is a 450-person hacker space up in Silicon Valley. This is how I got my start. I said, I want to be an entrepreneur. That's all I know. So I'm going to go find other entrepreneurs who are better than I am, smarter than I am, and surround myself with them. The Hacker Dojo is a place that I chose. Now, this place has also produced a company called Kaggle, $200 million valuation. Pinterest actually came from the Hacker Dojo. And Pebble, the smartwatch that launched all of these smartwatch revolutions. And there's also plenty of bad stuff that's there, but I gotta tell you, just being in that environment and talking tech has really created some really impressive things. So what's next? I want you to celebrate risk and celebrate failure, right? Failing is something that you're really going to have to look at and define as, well, I've heard that the definition is failure is having goals and not reaching them. Bullshit. Failure is having goals, not reaching them, and not doing anything with that knowledge. Quitting, giving up, or just, well, it didn't work because whatever excuse. In Silicon Valley, there's a number of venture capitalists who say, well, okay, your pitch is nice. So, what else have you built? What else have you failed at? You know what the worst answer is? I've never failed. They say, well, great, come back when you have, because I don't want you to fail with my money. I'd rather you learn. I'd rather you come back with knowledge that comes from failure. The next thing, I'm going to keep saying this probably for the rest of the night. I'm going to have some sort of recess. I'll tell you, reinvest, reinvest, reinvest. If you make it big, or even today, if you've learned a single thing from any of the speakers, give it back to someone. Not everyone could be here. Give that knowledge, pass it on. If you make it big, invest in new companies. If you've failed and learned something from it, give that back. That reinvesting into the ecosystem is what literally built Silicon Valley. So we'll follow another thread. Back to Fairchild. One of the other first venture capital firms was Sequoia, also that came from Fairchild. They invested in a little company called Google. Google obviously IPO'd, and they sent an absolute tidal wave of angel investors into the valley. People who said, I don't want to do that again. Like that was really hard. It was great, and I want to be part of it, but maybe not, I got a family now. So I'm going to invest in other companies and help them in any way that I can. And we're seeing this cycle repeat again and again and again and again and again. If you take nothing from today, please remember to give back. So one of the final things is that I've had, I want to say at least 15 different countries who I've met reps or advisors or people who said, well, we're going to be the Silicon Valley, we're going to be Silicon Hill, or we're going to be Silicon Beach. And we're seeing all kinds of cities in America that are doing this. And I don't know what to tell them because Silicon Beach, this is Los Angeles. I want to tell them thank you because you're sending us all your best startups. And you're doing all the work and we're getting all the benefit. So if you try to just create Silicon Valley of Latin America, we already exist, right? You don't want to just recreate what we've got. In fact, actually, one of the few ecosystems I've seen that's really been successful is Tel Aviv. Why? Because they don't care what Silicon Valley does. They just do their own thing. They've taken their own culture, their own people. They said, well, screw Silicon Valley. They've done something awesome, whatever. I don't care. We're going to do what's right for us. We're going to do something interesting that works for our people. So I'm not sure if you've heard the term before, but a lot of times investors ask, well, how are you the next Google? How are you the next Facebook? How are you the next WhatsApp or whatever the flavor of the day is? And the interesting thing is that Facebook was the next Google, not by doing search. Detroit was our last innovation ecosystem. They built cars. Well, until Tesla, we hadn't built any cars out in Silicon Valley. We said, we're going to do something different. We're going to do tech. So keep that in mind. Again, if you're trying to recreate Silicon Valley the way that we created, it's not going to work. Do something interesting, unique, different. All right. So So wrapping it up, what are the keys to jump-starting an ecosystem, at least that we've found? The first, a skilled workforce. Now we've seen that in a number of places where it was universities that were local. But let's say that you don't have what you would consider a skilled workforce here, or skilled enough volume. Well, neither did the United States. And instead what we did, we said, well, and it's just still this way, is we don't do a very great job of teaching people who grow up in the States. Instead, until recently, we had a very open, engaging, hey, just come build, come here. Well, what did that do? Einstein left Germany. He said, I don't want to be here. I want to come to a more interesting, I want to come to a place that, well, I don't know exactly his reasons. I've got some wild guesses. But so the United States got him. So what I'm saying is that investing in education is important, but it takes 20 to 30 years. Investing in making a culture, a place where people can come and they can build and they can be part of your ecosystem regardless of where they're from is a way to hack it. The second, audacious thinking. You got a bunch of crazy bastards like me who think, oh, hey, I've never been in healthcare. I'm going to go fix the healthcare market. Which is probably not the smartest idea, but hey. So think crazy. In fact, actually, if no one tells you that you're crazy when you tell them that your idea for a startup, then you're probably not thinking big enough. Third, a spark. We've seen a number of different things. We had Fairchild Semiconductor, which sparked us. Startup Chile had the government. You got to get something going. And frankly, looking here, looking at the foundation, it might already be here. The fourth, this is one that I don't know if anyone in this room necessarily can change directly, but regulation kills innovation. And I don't know exactly how else to put it, to be honest. The more regulation you have, it's meant for safety. It's great for safety. Innovation and safety are complete opposites. In fact, actually, there's something I haven't told you about Fairchild. So Fairchild Semiconductor, for as great as it was, actually polluted our water. For 8 years, I drank water out of a bottle because you weren't really able to drink the water in the ground. And so you sit here and you think, well, we should have regulated that. Well, maybe. But what if that would have killed what is now Silicon Valley in its infancy? So would I trade clean water and those 8 years of drinking bottled water for Silicon Valley? I honestly wouldn't. And then again, one last time, reinvest, reinvest, reinvest. Pay it forward. Thank you. Questions?
I understand in Silicon Valley, so imagine you have the founders, they own the company, and the founders get to have like 200 employees or something. They're growing, etc. And at some point they have an IPO, some kind of exit. In Uruguay, normally, as far as I know, the founders get all the money. The employees, they either continue with the company or they get just some nice bonus, and that's it. But I already asked about this before. They don't have shares
Right.
normally, okay? So do you have, like, is that important to be able to reinvest, right? Like, to exponentially grow the amount of angel investors, potential angel investors for new companies or not? And if it's not through shares, is there any other way for that to grow? Because if you only have the two original founders who get rich, and then they are the only two who get rich with that, and then they get to decide where to put their money and reinvest.
Right.
It only can grow so much, right? So what are other possibilities?
It's a tough question. Well, so you can reinvest a number of things. You can invest money. Now, unfortunately, it sounds like to be able to grow exponentially the angel investors, that really falls on the founders. Are they going to share their wealth with their employees as a thank you? I mean, I can't force that. It'd be nice.
I understand in the Silicon Valley it's normal to reserve like 15% of shares for...
You give at least that, yeah. But yeah, so I don't know exactly how to answer the question from a money standpoint. But there's other currencies that you could offer. So let's say that you're employee number one at a company that becomes huge, and your investors are, or your founders, they don't want to give you anything. I think that's horrible, but sure, fine. Have you gained any knowledge that you could give to the community? Have you, I'm thinking you could even do consulting if you had to. Now, granted, it's not exactly reinvesting, but a lot of people will give their time, money, effort, knowledge back. So even if you didn't make a ton of money, say, well, look, this is what happened to me. This is how our startup did well. This is how our startup failed. And let other people piggyback off of your knowledge. Startup Chile has been doing that, right? Is that they require everyone to go back out in the ecosystem and to talk on it, to run events on it. I'm not super familiar with it, but there's other currencies besides money. As far as the not having shares for everybody, that's something that I would lobby to change it, to be honest. Bueno.
What are the possibilities for a startup from Uruguay to fundraise money from Silicon Valley, for instance?
You're not going to like this answer. Let me explain that with a little bit of a story. So an investor invests in about 12 companies per year as a professional venture capitalist. 36 companies total over the life of, usually invest over 3 years. So even if it's a big venture capital firm, you invest in 12 total, one every quarter. You'll sit on between 5 and 10 boards. Usually, you want to do your board meetings in person, almost always. So to put that in perspective, if you have to be every quarter coming to a board, it took me 19 hours to get here, one way. So a lot of investors are not going to want to do that. You can get dumb money. I think we saw much better ways of fundraising here in Latin America than Silicon Valley. They're going to require you to come to the United States. They're going to require you to incorporate in Delaware. So if you want to create, grow, and stay here, I don't personally think it's the best option.
So do you think moving to the States is like an option? And do you know any case from Uruguay or any country from Latin America that the founders or they move to the United States and raise any money?
Yeah, there's a lot of them. And of course, I can't think of them right off the top of my head. It's an option. I would say if that's what you want to do, then yeah. It's more difficult because you'll have no network to start with, but that's not that hard to hack. A few years ago I had no network and I just started hosting events, and all of a sudden I'm meeting people and going, why are you talking to me? Like, I thought you were supposed to be like way above me. So a network is pretty critical for getting investment in Silicon Valley. Did I answer your question?
Yes. Do you think like once you're there in Silicon Valley, it's pretty easy to build that network? So once you move there, the ecosystem, I think, is like really friendly, and you can talk like with the CEO of I don't know if Mark Zuckerberg maybe, but it's like very friendly, the ecosystem, and you can meet them at a bar, for instance.
Yeah, it's definitely a friendly ecosystem. You can come in and network pretty quickly if you've got, if you're really focused on it. Yeah, I mean, you can do it. I would say, you know, I mean, Mick, you were talking about it. It takes 3 to 6 months to close investment once you've got the network and had the pitches. So, you know, set your time scale accordingly. You know, it does take a while to come in, to build a network, to meet the people, pitch them, and close on investment, move, etc. And it's stinking expensive, to be honest. Like, if you could figure out how to attack niches down here, I don't know. I'm starting to see more opportunity here than in Silicon Valley, because you guys actually can approach real problems. You have to have a business model that makes sense. You can't have Google Shopping. I can literally order a tube of toothpaste and have it sent to my door for free shipping within 8 hours. That sounds cool, right? Yay! It's the most ridiculous economics I've ever heard of. And this is the weird bubble that we're in Silicon Valley. So part of me says, you know, figure out a niche here that's worth worth approaching. Build a strong business model where you actually get paid, and don't focus on the Silicon Valley, like get funding, IPO, and then open your books and look like Groupon and go, oh shit, we haven't made money in ever. But yeah, so it is possible. You can do it. There's plenty of people who have, but I don't know if I recommend it, to be honest.